Okay, kiddos. Once Abraham Zapruder captured that horrific assassination on film, he was very, very shaken. And he walked back to his office in the Dow Tex building. Very, very shaken, as you might imagine. Well, on his way to his office, he ran into a guy by the name of Harry McCormick. And before he got to his office, he ran into McCormick, and McCormick was a reporter for the Dallas Morning News. So after seeing this horrific assassination firsthand through his own viewfinder, Zapruder, who is very shaken, walks back to his office, and on his way to his office, he runs into Harry McCormick, who's a reporter for the Dallas Morning News. And he told McCormick about what he had just filmed. And he arranged to meet the reporter back in his office at the Dow Tex building. So he tells Harry McCormick what he has just filmed and agrees to meet with the reporter back in his office at the Dow Tex building. Well, McCormick, having information that he thought might be pretty important, got together with Forrest Sorrells, who was the head of the Dallas branch of the Secret Service. And where was he riding in the motorcade? Anybody remember? No, lead car. He was in the lead car. And McCormick got a hold of Forrest Sorrells and informed Forrest Sorrells of the Secret Service what Zapruder had filmed. So before meeting Zapruder, Harry McCormick of the Dallas Morning News informs Forrest Sorrells, who was the head of the Dallas branch of the Secret Service, who was riding in the lead car in the motorcade, about the film. Well, this is so weird. Zapruder gets back to his office, and his business partner, Erwin Schwartz, who's not at the office, calls the office to talk about the news he's heard of the president's assassination. He has no idea that Zapruder has this film, obviously. So Zapruder's business partner in the dress manufacturing business, Erwin Schwartz, just happened to call the office to talk about the news of the president's assassination. Well, the secretary answers the phone and tells Schwartz that the police were in the office with shotguns looking for this film, because the word got out that he had this film. So when Schwartz calls a little bit later after Zapruder arrives, he's told by the secretary, yeah, geez, you wouldn't believe it, Erwin. There's all kinds of police officers in here with shotguns looking for this film. Well, she continued to tell Schwartz that Mr. Zapruder had ordered her to lock the film in the office safe because he didn't know what really to do with it. So he took the film out of the camera, like I showed you yesterday, the film, took it out and had the secretary lock it in the safe at the business there in the office to keep it safe. Well, Schwartz said, well, put me through to Mr. Zapruder. I want to talk to him on the telephone in his office. So the secretary transfers Schwartz's call into Zapruder's office. And when Schwartz began to speak to his partner, Zapruder was crying. And he stated to Schwartz, quote, "Oh, Erwin, it was terrible. I saw his head come off." That's what Abraham Zapruder said to Erwin Schwartz. And when he got into the phone in his office, Schwartz was later quoted as saying that his partner was crying, and he said to Schwartz, "Oh, Erwin, it was terrible. I saw his head come off." Well, the next people to come to the office were Forrest Sorrells, the Secret Service agent, and Harry McCormick, the reporter for the Dallas Morning News. And they had Zapruder retrieve the film from the safe. Now you got to keep in mind, this is all going on as the president is being rushed to Parkland Hospital and eventually be treated the best they can in that whole story, which is for later. We're kind of going to only do one thing at a time here. Well, all three men, McCormick, Sorrells, and Zapruder, took the film to a nearby television station to have it developed, because it was just the film. So all three men took this film to a local television station to get it developed. But when they got to the television station and asked him to develop the film, they told him the only way it could be developed is if a Kodak photo company developed it, because it was a Kodak camera. A lot different than today, right? So when they went to the television station to try to get that film developed, the television station informed them that only a Kodak photo company could develop the film. Well, McCormick, who is the reporter, obviously had a lot of connections in the media, right? And the media had a lot of their film developed by Kodak. So McCormick made arrangements with Kodak Film Company, which is in Dallas there, to develop the film. And because McCormick had those connections, it was done pretty quick. So Harry McCormick of the Dallas Morning News used his connections with the media and made arrangements with Kodak to develop the film. Now, if you can imagine, nobody's seen this, right? So the film's developed, and Zapruder and McCormick and Soros view this film, which is just horrific. I mean, it shows the entire assassination. No one else has it, anything like it, okay? And they made 3 copies. Who gets a copy? Zapruder keeps a copy and the original. Who else gets a copy? The Secret Service and big boys, FBI. So 3 copies are made of the film at the Kodak Film Company. Zapruder keeps a copy and the original. 1 copy is given to the FBI, and another copy is given to the Secret Service. Another person they allowed to view the film was Richard Stoley. And Richard Stoley was a representative from Life magazine. Richard Stoley was a representative from Life magazine. And what do you think Stoley asked Zapruder once he saw the film? What would Life magazine like to do? Purchase, but to show it, so to speak. Life magazine's not a movie theater, so think a little bit. You're on the right track, because we're way back in '63. Life magazine wanted to purchase the film so they could take still photographs of it and put it in their magazine. Okay, so they wanted to purchase the film. So Stoley asked Zapruder if there was any possibility that Life could purchase the film. Well, since Stoley was the first person from the media to ask about purchasing the film, Zapruder gave Life the first chance to do so. I don't think he was looking to make money here, but he's gonna. Okay? So since Stoley was from Life magazine and they were the first person from the media to ask about the purchase, Life was given the first opportunity. Stoley's first offer was $5,000 for the film. $5,000. Does Zapruder take that? Why? What?
He's a businessman.
Well, yeah, I knew it was worth much more than that. So the first offer was $5 grand. Well, they kept negotiating, and when negotiations got to $50,000, Richard Stoley didn't have the right to make that deal, so he had to call his superiors in New York, because Time Life offices were located in New York, so he had to call his superiors when the price got to 50 grand. Well, by noon on Saturday, November 23rd, that would be a day later, less than a day actually, right? Because 12:30 was shot. Life magazine had bought, now pay attention, the print rights to the film for 2 payments of $25,000 each. So by noon, the next day on the 23rd, Life magazine had bought the print rights for 2 payments of $25,000 each. Now they received the original, the copy, okay? But since they only purchased the print rights, what could they only use? Pictures. Keep that in mind, okay? Now the original film was taken to Chicago, where Life magazine was being published at the time. And the copy that Stoley received was sent to New York, which was the business headquarters of Life magazine. So even though Zapruder owned the original, he allowed him to take it to Chicago, where Life was published. That copy that Stoley received was then sent to New York, where the business headquarters of Life magazine were. On Sunday, November 24th, C.D. Jackson, the publisher of Life magazine, watched that 26-second film. On Sunday, November 24th, C.D. Jackson watched that 26-second film. After viewing that, he made the decision that the American public was not ready to see such a sight of the president's death. What does C.D. Jackson want next from Zapruder? Very good. He wanted what they call the motion picture rights. Once he received that, he'd be the only one that would have the ability to show the entire film, in essence. And he went and he told Stoley to try to buy the motion picture rights as well. He already received $50,000 for the print rights. Well, Stoley calls Zapruder, asks him if he would like to sell the motion picture rights to the film. Does he still have to give him the original? No. Okay. Well, Stoley and Zapruder met on Monday morning, November 25th, to discuss the negotiations. And Zapruder was offered another $100,000 for all rights to the film. That $150,000 in today's currency would be about $1.2 million. And he accepted. Wow. I don't think that's quite what he had in mind that day, but he had the only full film of the Kennedy assassination. Okay? All right, that's going to take us to events back at Parkland Hospital, kiddos. So now we're going to be going kind of back and forth, and we're talking about 2:30, the president's been hit. And after the president was hit, I told you that Clint Hill provided a human shield in the back of that limousine as they raced 77 blocks, or 4.6 miles, to Parkland Hospital. The presidential motorcade reached the hospital at 12:36 p.m. 3 minutes. 3 to 6 minutes, depending on how you look at it. 6 minutes, actually, from the time the shots were fired. Fellow right up here in the cowboy hat up here, guy by the name of Milton Wright, who was a Texas Ranger, witnessed the horrific event of the motorcade reaching Parkland and the events afterwards. So one of the men who witnessed this horrific event was Texas Ranger Milton Wright. He actually was riding in the 5th car of the motorcade. And guess who was with him in the 5th car? Earl Cabell, mayor of Dallas, and his wife Deary, who gave Jackie the roses. Those two and Texas Ranger Milton Wright were actually in the 5th car of the motorcade. The significance of Texas Ranger Milton Wright at Parkland Hospital His right helped lift the wounded Governor Connolly out of the limousine's jump seat and onto the gurney that took him into the hospital for emergency care. Texas Ranger Milton Wright was actually one who assisted taking the wounded Governor Connolly out of the limousine and putting him on the gurney that took him into the hospital for emergency care. As he was doing that, he noticed other things, and this was what he was later quoted as saying about this particular time in his life. He said, quote, "As soon as we got him out," meaning Connolly, "a Secret Service guy ran up in the car and pulled the president over to one side. I could see partially the side of his head was gone." Wright was then asked to help put President Kennedy on a gurney and then stood outside the hospital. So he was in the thick of it. That didn't happen right away, because the president was only removed from the limousine after protest from Mrs. Kennedy. Jackie refused to allow Agent Clint Hill to take her husband into the hospital. And Clint Hill pleaded with her, "Mrs. Kennedy, we've got to take him in. Mrs. Kennedy, we've got to take him in. No, no, no. You know he's dead. No." She wouldn't let Hill take him in. Pleaded with Jackie to let him take him in. "No, Mr. Hill, you know he's dead," as she cradled him. Why wouldn't she let him take him in? What?
She didn't want to let him go.
Didn't want to let him go, maybe.
A little crazy.
No, well, she might have been a little hysterical, but she had a specific reason. Anybody know? Absolutely. There were people there. She did not want people to see his head in the condition it was in. And finally, Clint Hill figured that out. It clicked in his mind. So what did he do? Took off his sport coat, wrapped his sport coat around the president's head and said, "Mrs. Kennedy, we've got to take him in." Once she realized that he figured out her concern, she allowed Clint Hill to take him, put him on the gurney, and take him into the hospital. So finally, Clint Hill realized the problem, took off his sport coat, covered the president's bloody head, and then Jackie allowed Hill to remove the wounded president to take him to the hospital. A witness to that event was a nurse by the name of Phyllis Hall. Here's Phyllis Hall right up here. Phyllis Hall witnessed this event. She was the one that obtained the gurney and raced it to the presidential limousine. So she witnessed this entire scene of President Kennedy being removed after Mrs. Kennedy provided that protest. She witnessed the whole thing because she was the one that was asked to go get the gurney to put the president on. Also at Parkland Hospital was Senator Ralph Yarborough, because he was also in the motorcade. Riding with who? Lyndon Johnson, who's also there. Okay? Well, this is what Ralph Yarborough was quoted as saying later at Parkland. This is really something. He said, "The minute the car stopped," we're at Parkland, "the Secret Service rushed at Johnson and formed a corridor around him. I heard one of them say, 'Mr. President,' to Johnson, and I knew then that Kennedy was dead." He didn't know until that point when the Secret Service referred to Vice President Johnson as Mr. President. Kennedy is rushed into Trauma 1, which is an emergency room at the hospital. He's rushed into Trauma 1. The first physician to see the president was Dr. James Carrico, just 28 years old, a resident in surgery there. Legitimate doctor, resident in surgery, but just 28 years old. Dr. James Carrico was the first physician to see President Kennedy. After examining the president, he reported these 4 things. After examining the president, Dr. James Carrico reported these 4 things. He reported a small wound of the anterior neck in the lower 1/3. He reported a small wound of the anterior neck in the lower 1/3. What's he talking about? That exit wound out the president's throat. He reported that. A small wound of the anterior neck in the lower 1/3. He reported one wound that shredded the brain tissue, which had profuse oozing. He reported one wound that shredded the brain tissue, which had profuse oozing. He's talking about what? Head wound. Yep. One wound that shredded the brain tissue, which had profuse oozing. What might be the next thing he checks? See if he's alive. What? Close. He reported no pulse or blood pressure being present. He reported no pulse or blood pressure present. And he also reported the president's pupils were dilated and fixed, which tells you what? He's dead. Okay? But nobody wanted to say that. This was the President of the United States and a popular president. They're going to do everything they can to show that they made an effort to save him. Dr. Don Curtis, I have all these doctors up here if you want to take a visit later. Dr. Don Curtis, who was assisting Dr. Carrico, was the one that unbuttoned President Kennedy's bloody shirt and saw what he thought was a bullet wound in the president's throat.